good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Francesco.
All,
Hey,
Professor
Francesco.
Mastronardi, Professor Kuhn, Pál Miletics, I saw in this moment. This morning we had interesting sessions about the cooperation with Ukraine and the other places of where the emergence problems. Now we restart giving the word to Professor Mastronardi about the security, artificial intelligence, and data privacy in this in ICT in digital field. Professor Mastronardi is a professor of Polytechnic of Bari and the former president of all the Italian Association of Automatic Computing. Professor Mastronardi.
Thank you very much, Francesco. At now, we are 11 participants that I think that it is possible to start this session. Good afternoon to all participants and at this 6th international meeting on telemedicine and digital health. We know that processes digitalization and then the IT infrastructures are very important for digital assistance and emergency in medicine. In particular way, in this next session, we will go to consider the important item of big data, artificial intelligence, biosecurity, data privacy, and then cybersecurity. We can start this session with the contributes of Dr. Lewis Kuhn. I think that this is a good way for pronunciation your name. That is a president of the IEEE Society for Social Implication of Technology. That introduce this session and in particular the problem of emergency and disaster management for the digital society. Well, possibly in 15-20 minutes for your presentation. I remember to all rector presenter. Please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very complex topic because when I look at this problem holistically, there are many angles that we need to consider, and so let me see if I can share my. Okay.
Yes, I see.
You see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so it's going to be difficult on one hand to compress everything because there are too many topics. So I try to go fast, but I can stay a little bit longer after, and so if things are raised. But one of the important things in all of this talk is towards the end. It's the issue about exercises, the importance that they have, because a lot of people skip because of political reasons. They don't support agencies to do these things. And then when there is a crisis, they don't know what to do. And of course, the crisis can come in many different shapes. You have all types of natural disasters. The bottom there shows the volcano. And of course, we have the situation that we had in Las Palmas, this in 21. And I'm not going to go, I had some videos there, but I'm going to skip them because it's not only all the destruction of infrastructure that occurs with the lava, but also the toxics that come from the combination of the water with that, and which makes human life impossible. And this was happening a long time before climate change discussions took place. And 20 years ago, and particularly when I was teaching at the National Defense University, I developed some exercises. One of them, this, for example, happened now, February 3rd, here in Ohio. This is the derailment of a train. And of course, I had scenarios where you had different situations happening, explosions, the plume model calculations, things that already were there. Of course, today with social media, information goes very fast. But the fact is that neither public nor the press is well informed, and many of these things can happen on purpose by some terrorists. So it's not just accidents, and therefore, in the case of my exercise, I had, as I said, this is 20 years ago, with hydrogen fluoride, I had a whole set of protocols that people need to follow, and people need to understand if you're going to contrarrest that. And here you come to the issue of information, because if you don't protect this information, terrorists can use it against you. And so it's difficult in terms of what do you share, what you do not share. But for, of course, people from hospitals, firefighters, police, they need to know these things. So they have a common strategy. And of course, if we go to the case of, and this is why sometimes the combination can be crazy, but very complex. If you remember Fukushima in 2011, we had first an earthquake, then we had a tsunami following it, and then we had a nuclear explosion. And of course, this could be considered an accident, but actually it was, the starting was a natural disaster. So regardless of who starts the problem, imagine the combination when this happens on purpose. And of course, in terms of infrastructures, the combination of telecommunications and electricity is fundamentally important, because all the critical infrastructures are dependent on that. And society today cannot survive with those two. If one of those goes down, everything fails. So preventing, protecting, responding, it's all part of, and of course recovering, it's all part of this equation. And I used before the example of the Olympics because of the complexity, where you have to have surveillance, physical security, command and control, and other coordination with many agencies to protect people, assets, etc. So these are distinct areas of concern that you need to deal with. The vulnerability and consequence assessment, intelligence and analysis, physical cybersecurity, access control, surveillance. There is something called back office collaboration. Of course, you have incident management as well. And there are many tools that are used for these different purposes. And today, of course, we are even more concentrating on the electronics part, because everything is digital, and therefore the solutions will be digital. But the problem is, who do you share the information with in some ways? But at a very high level, you need to deal with very different collections of databases for law enforcement, intelligence agencies. In the case of the US, 85% of those critical infrastructures are private, but those that protect are government. So if you don't have a handshake between government and the private sector, then you don't have the security that you require. And the problem is that it goes to very, very different areas. Right here on the right, you have CBRN. That stands for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives. And for each of these, you have different protocols, different clothings that people have to use. And they, so federal government cannot do anything. When you have a problem of this magnitude, the locals are always in charge. And if they don't have the equipment, how can they deal with the problem? So, and that's why the importance of practicing prior to any crisis, so that you understand what is it that you need to protect, how is it that you have to work with others, who are those others, who can see the information, who cannot see it. And of course, everything, even the weather, can affect what happens, because, for example, if you have a chemical explosion, that cloud will be moving in a certain direction. But the same thing can happen if it's a biological or a nuclear. The responses might be different, the equipments might be different, but the planning to deal with these things are fairly much similar. So you're dealing technologically with sensors, you're dealing with surveillance cameras. Today you have a whole host of drones that bring a lot of very important information. Of course, GPS, GIS systems, all that becomes very, very important. And of course, the emergency planning, the real-time response collaboration become essential. And but the path that the information has to go through is extremely complex. And you are dealing with a whole variety of networks, of course, satellite communications, but you have lots of wireless circuits. You're dealing with voice, data, images. And so if you can establish like I'm showing here, a situation where you can simulate and have all these different, like a microcosm of your whole view in your own countries, then you come with a very complex matrix of places that need to see the information, and this information needs to be shared. So when you have an incident, then and somebody calls on the phone, that information has to go to some incident commander. Then you have local authorities at the local level, but those have to communicate with state, and then the state with the federal. Remember, in the case of the United States, you're dealing with areas that, because of climate change, you might have in one coast fires and no water, in other parts you might have floods, and then in another one you might have destruction caused by hurricanes. So, and you cannot say, I'm going to only address this state or that state. All of them have to be seen in parallel. So this requires a lot of coordination between the states, the locals, and in this case, the White House. And you have a whole set of agencies, because in some cases it might be an accident. But what happens if it's a terrorist act? Then other authorities need to get involved. So now the sharing of information is wider. In terms of the response, in terms of telemedicine, in terms of hospitals, the response is the same. But in terms of investigating, it's different. And therefore, you have more people, more segments that need to be advised so that you can counteract that problem. And then, of course, you have a big deal, which today is much more complex than when I was dealing with this 15, 20 years ago, because now social media spreads the information so fast. And what happens if what they're spreading is not true? So you have all this misinformation that is an added side of the complexity of cyberspace, which we did not have at the beginning. And of course, many of you might have heard the word ransomware. That happens anywhere. You suddenly might not be able to open files. So what I'm trying to do at the IEEE is create some sort of standards of what people need to do. If they find a text, they don't know if it's true, okay, go to this place. If you, on the other hand, are a surgeon and need to deal with a patient file, but you cannot open it, what do you do? Where do you go? So we're starting to get more into how society, not necessarily at the engineering level, but at the public level, how do people deal with it? Because today, every professional has a phone, has a computer, and this brings more complexity than into this picture. And of course, all these things that I'm showing you now, that you go from a very simple phone call telling you that there is a problem, it gets very complex, very fast, because you have different tools used for different, from vulnerability analysis, threat assessment, consequence management, to the areas that you already had of emergency planning and training exercises that you did before, to that interoperability management among agencies, the personnel, who is going to be doing what happens if in the process, let's say like a tsunami, suddenly the person that was in charge of this activity is dead or is gone. Who is the substitute? So it's that's part of that complexity. And of course, you have all these hazmat and the hazard materials that are being carried. And here you have a map, if you want, or a description of names of different companies that produce each of those little pieces of hardware or software that are needed to do what I just told you. And this then can be converted into all these different issues with information. And so you can have simulation places where you can showcase and show like data sets and how to deal and practice this type of thing. You can have members of the agencies come here and practice. And of course, internally, you have all these networks and communications in a lot of very different activities that and exercises that need to occur in order to give responsibilities to individuals, share the incident, and deal with the responses. So in terms of the exercises, the scenarios not only help the organizations, but you understand exactly all these interdependencies that are happening and how prior to an incident, these things can happen. For example, you might not have electricity and suddenly the filters of drinking water that might be electric stop functioning. So now you have a public health issue caused because of the lack of electricity. And of course, you can go from one city to multiple cities inside a state. And of course, you can go, in the case of the United States, that is very large, you have multiple states and you have different sectors. You can have the fund, the banking, financial institutions, the hospitals. And part of my exercise, for example, is imagine if you're telling 50 or 75,000 people that you have to leave, but suddenly because of the chemicals involved, the ATM machines don't work, so you don't get any cash from the banking system. And now how do you move your car without gasoline? So, these are the type of things that need to be thought a priori of an incident. And of course, in some cases, you have private industry, as I said, and this different sectors make it more complex. Conclusions are, the exercises are extremely important to prevent, detect, respond to a cyber incident. It involves many different sectors working together, both at the physical and cybersecurity level. You have to have experience in that electronic, but also on technical hands on the piece, and that's why having the actual equipment helps getting that experience. The state becomes a little more complex than the city, but it's just more partners involved with similar concerns. And the corporate side it's that additional layer, which is the private sector working together with the federal government in avoiding that. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to go over too much, but the importance again of interoperability, and I'm not talking just two devices connecting, it's also semantic interoperability. When we talk about certain words, if I say a threat, obviously for a policeman, it might be a knife, a gun, or an explosive. But for the firefighter, it might be fire and smoke. And for a physician, it's bacteria and viruses. So each one has a different definition of what the threat is, or a perception, and they are all correct. So you have to have that common language that you can use during the emergency. And anyway, this is the example, Scarlet Haze. I don't want to go on that, so I'm gonna stop here and go back to you and see if you have any comments, questions, whatever.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think that the problem presented is a very interesting for the necessary research of solution of interoperability of the different systems to obtain an observation of all events in this case. Well, and there
And
are
Giuseppe, if I may, when you have a crisis like the one we had the last 3 years with COVID, in the case in the US, for example, prior to, I don't want to get into politics, but this is an important concern, which is in some ways what we call technology policy. And the reason is in the States, every one of the 50 states has a governor. So it's almost like you have 50 different countries where the governor is like a president. Somebody needs to coordinate among those 50. But in addition, you have another 191 countries that also need to be coordinated because, as you know, viruses and bacteria move very fast. And it doesn't matter if you isolate yourself, you're not going to solve the problem. This is like having simultaneous equations and trying to solve one at a time. You do not solve the problem. And this is the main concern that in prior administrations, that office that happened to be at the White House was eliminated to save money. And now you had a crisis that is completely out of control. You do not have the coordination necessary among 192 nations. And
Yes.
And even the poorest of the nations, if they don't have vaccines or ways of treating, the richest nation will suffer too, because it can come back. This is like a boomerang type of effect. So it's in the best interest of every country to help each other. And no matter what crisis is, and have empathy, but sometimes, so it's not a matter just of having the money, because even if you have the money, but you're not trained and you do not know how to use the technology will not solve the problem. So I'm just trying to emphasize the importance of educating and training people. And this is something that our group, where you have computer scientists, engineers, need to be part of that education process.
Okay, sure. Okay, are there any questions? Well, I think that it's possible to proceed with the next speech.
If you agree to introduce Engineer Capra, because Capra want to speak about cyber security.
Oh, well, thank
Okay.
you.
James Goldberg, some question?
Yes, I have a question to the presenter. I would like to know, I ask questions to each speaker because they're remarkable and because I don't have the opportunity to speak or work with them every day. So I allow myself to ask a question and participate. And this has been something I've done for the last, as you know, 25 years. I would like to know from the last presenter if he believes that there is a solution at a local level so that he can use a model that doesn't only describe all the remarkable areas that he described, but is there a model that eventually, after 3 years of virus, after 3 years of the COVID, after 3 years after recent threats in terms of Turkey and Syria and eruptions and earthquakes, can we deal with a local level so that it becomes effective? And can we not only give a remarkably clear all the problems that can exist and the problems of coordination, management, but are there models today that are now being used after the last few years to try and help use educate, formalize, and integrate all the people that are essential to provide a level of solutions.
Yeah, well, thank you for your.
I apologize for asking you this question because I know that it is very difficult, and for the last 15 years we have talked about it, but we have not come up with the same solutions.
Right. Yeah. Let me only add one level of complexity to what you just asked. As I mentioned during the talk, we have, and I'm going to use the example in the United States, you have droughts and fires in the West Coast, you have floods near the Mississippi, you have hurricanes in the south coming from the Gulf of Mexico, and that affect places like Florida, completely destroyed. So the issues are fairly different in those three areas. Now, after 3 years of droughts and fires in California, suddenly we have floods, we have snow, things that because of, now you add that layer called climate change, which adds a complete different, so it's very difficult to just say this is a discrete and static solution for the West, for the center, or for the East. Rather, we have a dynamic model, if you want, of different things that are happening in the same place. If I go now to a more holistic point of view and globally, you have areas of Pakistan that have been flooded, and I'm talking about 44,000 square miles that affect potentially 33 million humans because they don't have agriculture, they don't have food, but also where do they live if everything is underwater? At the same time, you have in the east coast of Africa, and I'm talking about Eritrea, Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, all that area, you have 22 million people's lives at stake because of drought. And so my approach has been to, and this is what I'm trying to do now as the president of the Society for Social Implications of Technology, is to get groups of students in each of these different regions or areas to focus on their problem. So it's kind of like, my approach is act local, but think global. And the reason you need to think global, because of the war that you have in Ukraine and in Russia, 30% of the grain that comes from those areas gives food to 52 different countries. And a lot of people, when you talk about the war, most people talk about the 10 million plus people that have left. Of course, the destruction, the arms that they need to defend themselves, etc. But very few people talk about the consequences of lacking food in other countries because of the war. So now you have, again, layers of complexity that unless you do a lot of critical thinking, you're not going to solve. And contrary, from the way you formulate the question, I do not have a single place with a single problem. What I know that we do have, there is a program, and I tell you to get into internet and look for the word MOVE, M-O-V-E, because there are some trucks that have solar panels on the top, and with solar energy, they can bring satellite communications, internet access. So they move these trucks, for example, one is in the east and another one on the west coast. They go to areas where you might have thousands of people inside a stadium with no electricity, no connection, and suddenly this truck brings all the connections that allows for continuity of life. I'm sorry, the question is too big to answer, but this is kind of generic answer to what you were asking.
The question is not necessarily too big. The question is that in the future, we will have to have solutions and not just analysis that is brilliant.
Right.
We have to find solutions. And as you have said, students learning more and more in the different areas that are necessary to promote and develop solutions that are multidisciplinary and can be understood and can be used correctly are extremely important. So at one point you can analyze, and the other point you must provide analysis of solutions at a local level.
Yeah, and I would add to what you just said, in the university level, you need to train, or even high school students, to work together.
Absolutely.
To create teams that are multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary.
And that are appropriate for each area, because each area has different resources and different policies between government and local officials and preparedness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for both. And now I give the speech at Professor Capra, I think.
Engineer Capra.
Engineer Capra. That's
actually I was
Mauri.
more,
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no.
I think that his speech is the same, evident in artificial intelligence, digital security, and privacy. Is good.
Yeah, more let's say I was supposed to intervene in the let's say a tutorial section, because it's more kind of a tutorial with some practical cases. But since Mr. Kuhn just made such a great introduction to cybersecurity topic, we thought that it could be good to enter more in the detail on what it means in healthcare, and which is the thread and what can be the focus that we need to have in healthcare about cybersecurity. And if you let me share the screen, just okay, should be this one. Can you see it? Okay, I will focus on some specific threats that we can see in the hospitals and also in the IOMT, so in the Internet of Medical Things environments. So let's start from the situation of the hospitals. Just 1 second, because I lost the focus from my presentation. Okay, if we look into the news from in the last 5 years, we see increasing number of incidents, of attacks, and hospitals and healthcare facilities are becoming more and more primary targets for the cyber criminals. And there is a report that it was end of 2019 actually, where that just highlighted that at the time, and now it's worse, there was an increase of 31% just in that year, with more than 700 incidents, and almost 100 of them were considered as severe. And the cyber attack techniques that they usually adopt are pretty naive actually. It's phishing, so it means malicious emails which are sent by a sender which looks like a trustable source. So people open the emails if they think it is a trustable email, and it contains some links to click which are dangerous, or some links to dangerous sites, or to some malware or even ransomware within the email. Another technique, phishing, is a piece of social engineering. Social engineering are techniques to manipulate, to create confusion in the mind of the population, to make them do some actions which could be dangerous for them and dangerous for the company they work for. So these are the main two techniques, and actually, and the tool that is used the most often is that we have seen in the recent years in healthcare is ransomware. It means destroying or encrypting data of the information systems of the hospital to ask for a ransom. And one typical case happened in Germany, kind of end of September 2020, and that was pretty critical because it changed the scenario and what it means in terms of risk. There was a known vulnerability in the gateway, in the Citrix gateway in this hospital, which the attackers exploited and used to compromise, to introduce a ransomware in the systems of the hospital. It was the University Hospital of Düsseldorf, and 30 internal servers were compromised and encrypted and blocked, and this impacted the whole hospital function operations. So emergency department was impacted, and there was a lot of mess. And the hospital decided to move the patient, to stop all the surgeons or all the surgical operations, and to move the critical patients to other hospitals. What happens is that there was a very critical patient with a cardiac disease that had to be treated urgently, that died during the transfer. And this was, highlighting what it means when healthcare is impacted in terms of risk, when healthcare is impacted by such a kind of attacks. Of course, then the hackers just retard the attack, and the lady was dead. And this is kind of risk, but it's not only because of the attack. It was because the hospital, we will see it was because the whole hospital was not correctly prepared to face such a situation. Another case was the WannaCry case in UK in 2017. It compromised thousands of servers, and it almost created big issues to the national healthcare, the NHS in UK. And fortunately, the resilience of the system was such that no one died, but there were issues. There were an increase of the case of heart attack that were created serious consequences, because it took more to treat them, because all the NHS, all the healthcare system was slowed down because of this attack. And also there were kind of 19,000 appointments for visits that were rescheduled due to this attack, which kind of huge number. In Italy also we had some cases. Of course, it's from the legal term, it can be considered as a fraud, but if there are death or series of severe injuries to the patients, it's even more severe crimes can be considered. What I can foresee here on these hospital scenarios, there was a lack on operations continuity. So they were not prepared to face such an issue, such an incident. And it doesn't mean just in terms of redundancies or electronics or high technology to face the attack. It's a matter of, here it's really a matter of processes which are of business continuity processes, which are regulated mainly by an ISO standard, which is the 22,301. And we are not just talking, about technological solution. We have to, we need to understand that the standard is considering a kind of analysis, which is the business impact analysis, which really analyzes the situation and which can be the impact for the business, and in this case for the service which is delivered to the patient and for the health of the patient, and defines a maximal acceptable recovery time, which is the RTO. And also, based on this, so based on the severity of the impact, based on the maximum accepted recovery plan, a business continuity plan must be designed, and it must be designed considering each possible scenario. So let's consider this case. So all the systems are down and I cannot do anything, and I have some urgent patients. Guys, we worked with PayPal until kind of 10 years ago. If we have a severe situation, we can return to PayPal, but it must be written down. We need to have a clear process, a clear backup process, defining that if this happens, people have to do this. So no system available, I take the pen, the paper, and I do the triage of the person on the paper, and I put the piece of paper on the patient while he's moving through the hospital, and taking, you know, attaching to this piece of paper all the exams and all the things that the guy is doing throughout his path through the hospital, because the final goal is to save the life of this person. Of course, I will, you know, transfer some patients to other hospitals. There are based on the different kind of scenarios, there will be different actions that must be coded and must be really well known by all the operators, and everyone must be aware of the risk and of what to do in case this happens. The same, if the emergency number is called and all the IT systems are going down, the operator needs to have a backup way to work, to drive the people on the ambulance and to drive the patient somewhere, and to triage the paper at the phone and to do all the stuff. So this can be paper, can be a computer disconnected from the network. It is something that must be designed. There must not be a system without such kind of contingency plan in case something happens, because it will happen. It happened to this university hospital in Düsseldorf. It happened in a lot of other cases. There are thousands of examples. Disaster recovery plan is a different story. Disaster recovery plan, in the meanwhile, we restore the systems, and it must be very quick, and it must restore the full functionality of the system as soon as possible, with all the saving all the data and so on. But in the meanwhile, we must be able to work. So what went wrong here in this situation? Well, first of all, there was a vulnerability that was known, and the actions to patch the system, to resolve this, to fix this vulnerability, were not taken. It was well known from the beginning of the year, and the local administration sent several reminders to the hospitals to save the systems, because there was a severe risk of intrusion and of issues with this vulnerability, but this was not done, and the system were hacked. So second, the level of segregation within the network of the hospital was not okay, because when the attackers entered in the servers and the ransomware compromised some servers, it spread out throughout the hospital, even to the emergency department, not only to the university machine, but throughout the hospital. And this was while the different branches, the different departments were not well segregated. Otherwise, it could have been isolated in the place where it first appeared. So with this kind of scenarios, and then of course I already said the contingency plan was not suitable to face this kind of menace. When we think about these scenarios, we need to seriously think about network segmentation. So how to segregate each environment within the hospital to ensure that a menace can be isolated where it appears, and network real-time security. So analyzing in real time what's going on throughout the network, because we will see in the next couple of slides, to see when something wrong is entering, to ensure that I detect it real time, and then through the network segmentation I stop it and isolate it. Let's talk about IoT is changing a bit the environment. Let's talk about medical devices. We see some FDA announcements. Started with St. Jude with some implantable devices, the programmer for the implantable devices, but then it happens to Medtronic insulin pumps and to Medtronic implantable devices. Now devices are connected through mainly through some proprietary protocols, but in the end they are connected to the internet, to the systems, clouds, and so on. So they are vulnerable, and a close look to them. We must have a close look to them. IOMT has changed the rule because IoT devices are already perimeter security is not working anymore. It's not enough because IoT devices is already within the perimeter. So this is why I meant real-time monitoring, monitoring the traffic, segmenting the network, because we already have a potential enemy inside, because the sensor is vulnerable and the sensor is within the perimeter. So I need to have a way to isolate what is compromised. So let's skip, you know, there was a lot of notification, a report over 1,000 devices identified 164 cybersecurity risks. And many IoT devices were designed without thinking at security. Now it's different. Now FDA has issued guidelines and a playbook on how to secure medical devices. European Union provided guidance of how to implement GDPR along with new MDR, new medical device regulation, and with in vitro device regulation. But and also, you know, they allocated a lot of funds in Horizon 2022 for this purpose. But we still have many devices which are coming from the past, and we need to keep an eye to reduce the risk, of course. So the biggest challenge is, you know, devices do not have a lot of memory, so they cannot, you know, implement complex encryption. Most often they are not directly connected as IP devices. They use Bluetooth or other protocols, and then there is some nodes, some gateways to connect to an IP network. There are insecure proprietary protocols, like communication protocols, like I said, for the insulin pumps or the implantable cardiac devices. And also, when I need to patch, when I have a vulnerability and the patch is developed, but to implement it on a medical device, there is a long certification process. So it remains unpatched and vulnerable for a long time before the patch can be installed. And here just some examples of something that can happen to medical devices. So malware, denial contraction. So the operations device are disrupted. Then the device can be reconfigured in a wrong way or in a intentional malicious way. Then there can be spoofing of the device. So the false information can be sent to operation by impersonating a device with a fake one. Then the functionality can be manipulated, like it's being shown for the insulin pumps and implantable devices. And functionality can be modified, but there are a lot of other. Here is just a scheme. You know, we see that we have devices connected, but we have partners connected. Then most often things now are going to a cloud. So there is another weak point that must be controlled in the cloud. So it is, and let's say our devices can be assimilated to something that Mr. Kuhn showed before, which is a wireless sensor network or a personal sensor network. So different dummy devices, I mean, without a real strong security embedded, are connecting to a kind of gateway, which is then putting it in communication with hospital information system, with other stuff. And the real point is that we need to focus on this gateway to implement there the security, because there can be a lot of possible threats. As I mentioned before.
Other 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. I'm almost done. So we can have data alteration, so deletion or replacement of data, impersonation, man in the middle. It's a scenario called man in the middle. I replace a reliable gateway with a compromised one, and I can intercept the information, I can manipulate it, resend it. So in this case, working on the information itself with cryptography, with kind of freshness protection, so putting inside some information that cannot be replicated, and with strong authentication systems, that's kind of good countermeasures, but they must be designed case by case. I guess I'm done. It was the last one. So it really, I just wanted to focus on the importance to work on these. As Mr. Kuhn said, cooperation, sharing of information about the different threats and the different actions plan is key. Another key point really is not to think that there are general solutions which can be okay for every case. Each scenario must be analyzed and the solution must be found. I know just one thing that can be considered as a general solution, which is, awareness. The weak point of all the chain, the weak ring of the chain is people. In most of the cases, cyber attacks are starting from a weak point in the organization, in a person, or some people which are liable to social engineering, phishing, or attacks like this one. And another key concept that I would like to underline, it's not my idea, I'm just using a phrase of a famous guru of cybersecurity, is security is not a solution, is a process. Because I can go to sleep tonight thinking I'm safe, and tomorrow all the security measures I developed, they have been hacked. So it's, attackers are always running to break the chains, to break the controls, and we need to invent always new solutions, and we need to run after them. And this is really key. It's not, we are never there that we can consider us as secure. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Very interested. Solution also are requested in this moment for to be a system more secure. And my question is a simple consideration. Is also a good practice to install three-gate in sequence, three server, three firewall in sequence. In input and output, three-gate is better of one, I think.
From my point of view, well, it depends what you're using them for. So if you are using them to filter on different levels of the information, it can be provide added value. Another point is really to use internal segmentation firewalls. So not just to think about 3 firewalls on the perimeter, but to think about putting several of them to isolate different areas and be sure then when an attack is being detected, you are able to stop it there. So it really putting a lot of walls, will be creating issues, creating problems to the attacker and making the attack slower. But if you don't think about the content the firewalls are working on and how to use them the best way, the value that they give can be reduced. But of course, better 3 than 1. But if the 3 are used in a smart way to try to isolate, because on the perimeter, maybe when one is broken, all of them can be. It's just a matter of time. But and you don't detect the menace. But when it is inside and it shows itself by creating some damage, if you see it and you are able to stop it there, you will reduce a lot the risk, and and maybe, it's like a virus. If you don't see the symptoms, it's difficult to isolate and create a vaccine or whatever. While and here is the same. Until it is outside, it is difficult to detect it. When it is inside and it's created the first symptoms, you can more easily detect it and isolate it.
Okay. Are there some some experience about the use of visual cryptography? The visual cryptography.
You mean
for identification more sure?
You mean with face recognition? That one?
Yeah.
Using face like an encryption key.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, then I think there was a question from Mr. Kuhn. As far as I know, biometric signatures are a lot evaluated, but until the model was 2D, like for fingerprints or retina scans, they were not considered enough safe, and they used only as a factor within multi-factor authentication. With the visual, with face modeling, which is 3D, so it's more difficult to simulate from an hacker. There are some payments tools, some payments systems which are using it as a single factor authentication. Frankly speaking, I always prefer multi-factor authentication, but that's my point, of course.
Okay, James Goldberg have a question.
Yes.
Please.
We know that cybersecurity over the last 10 years has become a question more and more important. We also know that informatic resources and informatic programs have become absolutely essential and a part of every aspect of our lives, whether it be hospitalization, whether it be outpatient, whether it be all the things that you described in the outdoor home care, emergency, in hospital, or the wards. And as you know, we all know that this is critical. My question is, because your presentation was very good, but you talk about solutions, is there a possibility that you can create continuous solution education throughout education of our young people, younger generation, our professionals that are learning, and the professionals that are working?
I think that can be done, because in Italy we are starting in some regions some programs, and I'm currently also working on preparing an education programs to be introduced in the high schools about cybersecurity, and to increase awareness of youngest to the cybersecurity matters, which includes also other things like cyberbullying and other stuff like this. But I think this is really key, because what we are missing now is awareness. Companies are investing a lot in awareness trainings for their employee, and also government is investing a lot. I know that there are universities which are starting with some cybersecurity course of studies, and there are some and also there are these programs to start introduce cybersecurity as a matter in high school and also in lower level of educations, to start from the beginning. Also because our youngest people, they have a mobile phone in their hand from a very young age, so it's really key that they are educated on cybersecurity from the very beginning. And I think we are just starting, but I think it's a key move, and I think it will be successful. It's not, yes, as I mentioned, it's not a solution.
You say that security is not a solution; it is a process.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you,
Andrea.
Okay.
Yeah, when you look at the situation, particularly when you have, in addition to all the issues that you brought, in parallel, you have a disaster. If we look at the case of Katrina, the only places that they could have a backup was the Veterans Administration, because the patient information resided in someplace else. All the paper were, New Orleans is below water level, so all the paper records were lost. In the case of Fukushima, it's even worse, because you have a very elder population that when they went to see help in a hospital, they did not remember what pills they were taking. They maybe knew the colors. This is red, a yellow, a green, but they did not know the names of the medication. There were no records because everything paper-wise was lost. And in addition, all the equipment in the hospital, the papers that said what device was where in the hospital were lost. So now you have a much more complex issue in terms of the importance of having the information reside someplace else, so then you have very good backup. But that brings the issue that you're not in control of the security that those other external places to yours might have in terms of that information. So
that's absolutely true. And of course, when you have the risk for cybersecurity in addition to other kind of disasters, it's a perfect storm, and it's really difficult to have it under control. As I mentioned, the hospital in Düsseldorf, they didn't invest anything, not even in thinking about some contingency plan, and they were kind of undefended against the attacker. I think about Regione Lazio, the area near Rome, when they got the ransomware a couple of years ago. They had backup, but it was done not in a smart way. The backups were on the same network as the production system, so the backups were corrupted themselves. So it's really the real point is, how much effort do I put in the design of the solutions? And there will be never a perfect one. It's a fine tuning will be always needed. But as you mentioned, of course, it is important to manage to be ready to manage the disasters, to have the information relocated in several sites. And of course, if I have it, I will have to take care about the security of those sites, and have an eye on to ensure that it is safe. And when I update the main site, be sure that the backup sites, they are updated as well. And everyone must be smart, and there must be kind of central governance, ensuring that the guidelines and the processes which are governing the way these different sites are coordinated, updated, and patched is under control. It's not naive, I know. We are in a complex situation. It is an evolution, but I guess this is the only way. In the future, I don't know, there will be an artificial intelligence governing everything of this stuff, I don't know. But if it gets corrupted itself, it will be even more dangerous, I guess. So it's we don't have the solution in our hands now. We just can move on one step after the other, being aware where the risk is, and working all together, like you mentioned, to focus on the common goal.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. In the next,
Okay,
please, Francesco.
May I? This is Gopal from India. Thank you for a nice presentation. You made a simple case that patients have to move the hospital when the records are lost. Why is that necessary? The patient record is stolen or hacked. Why do we want to move the patient?
I'm not sure if I got the question. So
no, there was
the data of the patients are lost.
And you have moved the patients
Yeah.
to some other hospital.
And the data are lost. In Italy, it happened quite frequently in the past. So I don't know. Well, sometimes the only way is to redo the exam. Of course, you will have the anamnesis lost, but it depends. We need to understand case by case. If it's they can be lost if they are on an IT system for the reasons that we've been showing, the different scenarios, or they may be lost in they are in the paper, like in the case of the flooding in Louisiana, or even not only Louisiana. I think about Alessandria. Kind of 20 years ago, there was a flooding that completely destroyed all the archives of the radiology and of the medical records, and in this case it happens. If the data are just lost throughout the travel because there are piece of paper going on with the patient, and the data in the hospital are compromised by a ransomware, it's another perfect storm. I would say that if the patient have the only copy of the data, some additional care should be taken to avoid losing those data. But everything may happen, so we need to consider the case. Maybe they printed, they have to copy of the papers, or maybe they have to redo the exams. I don't know. It depends case by case.
Francesco, when you can, I can speak a little because I am on the session with this young, nice girl with arthritic rheumatoids treated with the pharmacodynamics and radio.
Okay, after Ritis
is not connected.
Okay, Valenzi, dai.
So,
very quickly, Valenzi, 10 minutes.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, of course. Vai a vedere questo, vado a aprire questo imbecillotti. And just we are looking for some development in biophysics and application to mind, brain, body connection, and also human intelligence that fall when we start with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson, and so on. Because our brain is quite
Valenzi,
yes.
This device is in cooperation with the Ukrainian.
No, not probably other device. This is a production in cooperation with the Omsk, Siberia. Omsk, and it is a cooperation between German, Italian, and European, Americans, and Russian scientists. It was developed 50 years ago. It was again developed, improved, and it is quite interesting because, as you can see, could help us to evaluate the electrical status in the system. Something has a large electrocardiography, not only to heart, but for example here to vertebra. This is the fourth vertebra. Claudia, come. Che ha fatto? Chiuso. And this woman was with the strong arthritic rheumatoids diagnosticated in the Florence University Hospital, Careggi. And she was with some trouble with the therapy and with the chronic acute pain. And from 6 months is followed by me with this device that monitoring. So you can see here the state of organs, specific or global organs, because now we are on the way with the visit. You can see here some part of discopathy, and we make some therapy with the specific magnetotherapy developed by software that go to find some molecular magnetic signals that are able to correct disorder of homeostasis, of entropy, better say. So induce order, coherence, and Madame can say what happens after this therapy, before and after the therapy generally.
I feel much better, less pain, more, the movement are more free, and I can sleep more in the night, more relaxed, generally.
And what is your position? Your pain, articulation is damaged. What is the diagnostics in the hospital?
The damage is there. In the hospital, they say that I have abrasion in the bones, little holes, and the inflammation is always there. Like synovial liquid is always there. Is reducing depression.
This second lumbar vertebra is quite in the trouble. And so we got to give her some magnetotherapy, radiofrequency, specific radiofrequency, that with the molecular signals of some drug keep out. The drug that she uses molecular signal, she can intake it, of course, nimesulide and Bassad. Bassad is quite an enigmatic drug, antibiotics for Lyme disease, because Madame has something of Lyme disease, and the lansoprazole for stress, because of his position, pain, chronic pain, other disorder induce gastritic of stress, of course. So we can go to analyze better this data, because we join molecular signals of drug for anti-inflammation, anti-dolorific treatment, gastroprotection. Not in this case, we don't use cortisonic, but we can use it too, because when the inflammation is very high, we must use cortisonic. And the situation, as she can say, is indeed some improvement. So synergic action between magnetotherapy, specific magnetotherapy, and drug signals could be very useful. Of course, in the case of uratic attack that I had in the last days, after the storm, great storm on Europe and Italy in particular, I had the precipitation of uric acid with the strong inflammation of gout attack, and I must take indomethacin for us, 50 milligram, and they go to block the terrible inflammation last evening. So I can go around thanks to indomethacin to high doses, high concentration. But sometimes we can select the signals of drug as with the key. We can open the door in the hotel without the traditional model of monod key lock, but only with the magnetic or quantum signals, because also it could be interesting to study better Francesco, the nature of signals in the modern key in the hotel, which we open the key. So also the transdermic drug for anti-inflammation, of course, don't arrive to a minimum concentration for activation of processes of anti-inflammation that we know in pharmacology. So we introduce the concept of pharmacoelectrodynamics that is quite lovely and useful. The main problem is where act these molecular signals, and the answer is not too simple. it seems that we have not only electrocardiography, cardiac electrical circuit, or electroencephalography for brain circuitry, or electromyography. All the organs, as you can see, nerve, structure of bone, but we can see also other organs. You can see here urogenital tract, or here the section of bowel, bone, muscle, etc. Also here continue with this. And here you can see thorax and heart. And here, very interesting, you can visit heart. And also atrioventricular fascial vis. It was sometimes very in danger because of inflammation produces some disorder. Now it's quite well. Madame don't have arrhythmias, etc. that had in the summer. But here you can see also again something of interest, main interest for us.
Okay.
Brain is interesting, and here we can find something of very fine for many problems in brain. Brain depression and other asthenia seems connected simply to psychological disorder or pharmacological neuroendocrinal disorder as a defect of acetylcholine, noradrenaline, acetylcholine or acetylcholine or other neuromediator. But here we can see something of interesting. And we see, I observe in my personal case, but now are a lot of cases, that we have interest by virus and bacteria, in particular Borrelia, Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease could play a key role. Here we can see something of interesting, because this is our central nervous, our central computer. We can see here lymphangite, malattia di Lyme disease. And we give to this woman Bassado, tetracycline, that's the antibiotics, and the drama, the enigma that the molecular signal is enough to change the history of this disorder. So you can see better the history of this dynamics in my talk in the conference in Kiev, in artificial intelligence conference in Kiev held in November, in 8th December. And you can see here my state of brain that was quite in danger, because I had, for example, in this case, a normal state, homeostasis, and the increase of entropy till black, that is the signals of bad entropy. And you can see here my brain this summer that was quite in danger. And you see my mood was quite a disaster. As I wrote, I take also some tentative of drug as Debac, citalopram, cipralex, and so on. And to the end, we work with this Indian guy, a doctor that work on subtle body, on chakra, and I have some improvement, but not for Lyme disease, just with the tetracycline. And signals of tetracycline all go to normalize, and I was this winter in Kiev with the director of Gerontological Institute of Kiev, Academy of Science of Kiev, and his assistant. And this quite interesting. A lot of study must be carried, and the study quite complex about study of influence of climate on health, study started by John Eccles that discovered synapse, a Nobel Prize, do you remember? Of the work, and introduced the magnetic quantum field in the activation of synapse. This is a matter that all you must pay a lot of attention in the analysis of brain phenomena, normal intelligence and disorder of memory and intelligence in human, and maybe also in artificial intelligence. The same model was developed in the immunological system by Benveniste. L'activation of allergic reaction could be by ligand receptor as a key lock, or also with the electromagnetic signals or quantum signals, as we can see here, with the activation of allergic cascade. Or here you can see just an experiment, a resonance, cyclotronic resonance of ions, that is quite important because it's not to the density, or it's not to the intensity or concentration of a magnetic field, the level of magnetic field, but you have a resonance peak that are of strategic interest for brain because it is a resonance of cyclotronic of ions, for example. And some theoretical work you can find here, Quantum Chemistry Journal, and the conference in the Kiev with the NATO, OTAN, in 12 years ago, of William Srivastava and myself, where we look for theoretical development. This was the work of Luc Montagnier, quite interesting, that catch the molecular signals in the DNA. Today is the anniversary of discovery of DNA by Crick and Watson, and DNA became able to produce some signals that are catch and revealed by some system. But of course, in this system, this work is a lot of advanced. And just finished the effect of electromagnetic field in a magnetic chamber, out of a magnetic chamber, normal chamber, a normal environment, a magnetic chamber, no change. When you submit people to high level of a magnetic field by antenna, radio telephone, you have increase of resistance, low current, low bioelectrical power, and the low immune system. The effect of music, water, and the drug. This is a very intriguing aspect. The effect of drug, when you have a disorder, you have an increase of resistance, low current, low electrical power in the circuitry that you can see here. For example, you see, you go to visit a vertebra, and you go to visit the level of resistance that here are measured by color. And the main problem of this drug, keep out this drug, because our problem is this drug work without chemical interaction. And Giuliano Preparata and Emilio Del Giudice explain us it with the Maxwell equation that see not only magnetic field, not only electric field, but potential vector, scalar vector, in particular potential vector that work in Bohm-Aharonov effect, and the same Josephson effect that you know very well in electronics. Preparata explained to us that potential vector extend to a nearby large area without transporting energy, but just information, exerting a fine influence. We call the same informatica that alters the phase of present coherent system. So it will change the phase. And I finished with the, you can find it in the potential in the patent of Putov that could be of great interest for all you, for superconductive phenomena in communication networks. And just here, other research and some reference, a long, strong meeting with our brother in Zanzibar 10 years ago, 11 now, years ago. And you can find it on this page.
Okay.
I got to put it in the chat, so you can find all this material there. Of course, to conclude, to make a conclusion, we need a large cooperation, scientific cooperation, to clear many points that are quite enigmatic in the biophysics, in the anatomophysiology, in quantum chemistry, etc., etc. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Sorry, Giuseppe, because Dr. Valenzi must speak this morning during the device session after Engineer Marchesi. I think it's interesting a new device like the device of Engineer Marchesi, and we can organize a working group. Sorry, Giuseppe, but this speech must be this morning during the but for connection, for problem, technical problem, we move the speech from this morning to now.
No problem, Francesco, no problem.
Go ahead.
Il prossimo.
The next, I think, is Pál Miletics. Pál, the last.
Yes, we are here.
Okay, the last Pál.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my colleague will share the screen. Joel, can you share the screen? Because in our presentation, I have split the presentation to two parts. I will start with the introduction, and then Joel will continue.
Can you see it now?
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Okay.
In the war of Ukraine war, the problem of food and nutrition is very important.
Yes. So my name is Dr. Pál Miletics. I'm the president of the Hungarian Telemedicine and e-health association. My colleague Zsolt Balla, he comes from the biological field, and Clementina Karmál, she is coming from the agriculture side, and Edina Balázs, she is also coming from the biological part. Our study, so it's a existing study with a 3 years long planning, what we will tell for you. So Zsolt, please, the next slide. So in our project, it's a 3 years long project. We will cover EU level telemedicine and also agriculture strategy. We would like to introduce and integrate European technologies together with Ukrainian technologies for their market, enabling companies and consumers to sustainable growth. Please, the next slide. From technological point of view, we try to use as broad technology as we can. So we use IoT technologies, blockchain technology, sometimes of telemedicine technology. In terms of gene sequencing, we use next generation sequencing, and we were able to cooperate with the Ukrainian company EUS Data. I would like to tell some words about them. This is a fully Ukrainian company. They have their own satellite system. The target is agriculture technology. They have roughly 200 employees, and they have developed crop yield modeling technologies using with the newest AI and machine learning function. So in our project, we integrating European, Hungarian, and Ukrainian technologies for a certain perspective. Please, the next slide. Why we have done it? We made a review that European Union started several initiatives. Maybe you know it, there are parallel projects, parallel programs like EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. There are also other action plans like the Zero Pollution for Air. There are also strategy for bioeconomic strategy. And also there are the Sustainable Blue Economic Strategy. So we try to prepare our project based on the EU guidelines using European and Ukrainian technology in terms of health and in terms of agriculture. We would like to present this type of researches during the next 2 or 3 international conferences. Today, Zsolt will present for you the agriculture and biological point of view, what we have done and what we would like to do in the next years together with the Ukrainian partners. Please, Zsolt, continue your presentation.
Okay, sorry about that. Now you can see, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So the title is Hazelnut Idea Model. Why hazelnut? Because Hungary and Turkey are among the biggest producers in the European Union, and because hazelnuts are highly nutritious and have many benefits for the consumers. Because of the climate and soil conditions, it was also viable to start a peanut breeding program, and in addition to cultivation. This program has also played a major role in Ukraine since the mid-1980s. So we have a connection now, and the initial focus of the breeding program was on crossing existing varieties. And however, this was too slow in the 21st century. This is why the potential of new generation sequencing is being exploited. And not only has this accelerated the program, but it has also resulted in improved yields for each variety, increased disease resistance, and increased nutrient content in the crop. Okay. I just it seems like I can't move perfectly, but maybe now. Okay, I'm sorry about this. At the pollen distribution problem, we have measured data, but for the short time I have no slides to show you right now. The same hazelnut varieties flowered 2 or 3 weeks earlier this year than the last year, and this is really important. What is the main reason? The main reason is the climate change, and where our plants are more sensitive to stress, so the flowering times are different, and the nutrient content is reduced, and these are very, very important. And the plant will therefore concentrate on survival functions, which will, of course, lead to a reduction in yield. There is also the advance and increasing damage caused by powdery mildew, what you can see on the bottom 3 pictures. And of course, farmers all around the world will therefore turn to conventional solutions to save their crops, their yields, and their livelihoods. This means using artificial chemicals. This will further damage the ecosystem and put it at an even greater risk of disease, depending on the concentration used. Some chemicals can even be toxic, polluting the air or also the water. The harvested crops also have to be transported to get there safely, and various chemicals are used again, such as pre-harvested insecticides and herbicides and post-harvest fungicides. Other invasive species can also be introduced with the shipments. Okay, and what the benefits? The EU, European Union, has just recognized the danger of this and has introduced important safety measures and rules. This would also improve the impact on human health by reducing the number of individual infections, making the epidemiological impact easier to control, and reducing the use of vaccines and antibiotics. Overall, prevention would be more effective. People would lead healthier lifestyles, and the immune system would be stronger. Ultimately, less money would be spent on medical care. The advent of new technologies has also opened the door to personalized medicine that we have long sought. Recognizing the potential, personalized agriculture could be developed. In doing so much, more precise, more precise the farming technologies could be developed. Ultimately, we could achieve increased yields with fewer chemicals. Not least, the soil would become richer. And this is better for our environment and finally for our earth. And our conclusions are, finally, we cannot emphasize enough that the climate change and extreme weather conditions have an impact on our lives. Heat or water stress in peanuts and other plants affects growth, their growth, and their development, and their results in poorer yields, which in turn leads to more chemical use. The latter has a particularly negative impact on our environment and human health. So finally, it is crucial to implement digital solutions in sustainable agricultural practices, also with telemedicine. Farmers need to be supported in this, and this is the only way, what we think, to ensure the long-term viability of hazelnut and also other crops. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jim. And I call the co-chairman of this session, Francesco, to conclude this session. And I thank you for the attention and participation of all these present. Okay.
Thank you, Giuseppe. It's interesting this last presentation, because the climate change is another important dramatic emergency, because we each year, each month, each day, we are under this emergency of climate changing, with a lot of problem, raining or not raining, desertification of in Italy and other parts of Europe. This is a component, very, very important component. This last speech relating for me of the One Health during and after the pandemic emergency. We discussed in Italy 2 years ago. Remember, Giuseppe, in during the Italian G20, we discussed about this new paradigm, One Health, or better, One Digital Health. This last presentation, I think we can insert in this new paradigm of the healthcare is together, is a wall with the animal disease, plant disease, agriculture, food, and so on. Is connected. Everything is in network, in connection. I hope to invite people in another big conference we are organizing in the south of Italy, in Salerno, during the presentation of a new hospital for animals. With you, we won't discuss about this digital One Health, holistic aspect of the healthcare, in order to prevent new diseases, to prevent new disasters, to prevent the new pandemic. Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you all the speakers. In today is a very long day, and now we go in the last session in Italian language to present to a lot of Ukrainian health operators, doctors and nurses, for this tutorial about the biomedical device, medical devices, and the using of this even in our country. This is an example of cooperation with the people coming from Ukraine and refugee here or in other countries of Europe. Some question? James Goldberg.
Yeah.
Yes, I would just like to ask one question. Where are the definitions of pertinence for the inclusion of patients that have different backgrounds in terms of their pathology, their health existence, their age, and the drugs they take? Are we using, when we test these new impacts of changes in our elevation of and creation of nutrients, pharmacy, agriculture, are all of the patients clearly defined perfectly so that they're comparable and the results in their health are comparable?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand everything perfectly, but I tried to answer.
I tried. It's very simple. How can you make sure that the comparison of populations are exactly the same by having personalized medical evaluation that is always when you have groups of patients, they're all the same and they have the same biological and health functions?
I'm not sure about this. I can't be sure, but I try to spare everywhere. What were
When you compare populations and the impact of the results, you have to make sure that all the patients are the same and have the same medical, biological systems. Otherwise, you have different patients with different systems and different
that's
results.
Right. Actually, that's right. That's correct. But I'm pretty sure that a little bit doesn't matter where the patients are. The patients who just eat the plant, if it comes from any plant, they eat nutrients, and actually, what I think, if the plant just comes from different countries, it has a risk. They use any chemicals, and it has a risk. They with the exported plants comes invasive species, and what I think is it has an effect for the patients who just eat these plants.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say to you is that as a doctor and as a specialist in terms of personalized medicine, we must always compare equal groups of patients that are exactly the same medical and biological age, sex, et cetera, and that's called personalized medicine. It's very important.
Okay. Now I think I understand. I was talking about different, what you just asked. The personalized medicine, what I think and what I know about it, I'm just saying we have to move this knowledge to the agriculture, and we have to put all the knowledge, what you just figured out in the personalized medicine, to the agriculture, just because it is important to reduce the artificial chemicals and make everything more comparable in the agriculture, just like in medical healthcare.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Was it good for you?
You were talking about reducing differences in agriculture, and I was talking about the importance of the results of the impact that you have, the consequences, and assuring that these results are given with populations of patients that are comparable and exactly the same. So that we do not compare results with patients that are different. We
fully agree with your recommendation, Mr. James Goldberg. In this stage, we focused more on agriculture and biological point of view, and the next phase we would like to add additional research area, and what you have mentioned is really crucial, and we would like to add into our
personalized
research
medicine
area.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Luis.
Yeah, just one comment.
Yes.
Independently of the nutrition, the value of diet, and protocols that we might want to follow, the effects of climate change, at least in the US right now, are that you have farmers that, well, first you have ranchers that have to stop having cattle because the cattle does not have water, so they're abandoning that part of nutrition. Secondly, the farmers have to look for plants that don't require too much water because there is no water in those places. So now you have a shift because of weather related issues that make you think differently. That's why I said earlier in my presentation act local, but think global. Because if certain plants, and it could be hazelnuts or it could be anything, if you think that that's something that is important for the nutrition of people and needs to be planted regardless of where it's planted, I know that currently 62% of that is produced in Turkey, but Italy produces that, in the US, etc., and Chile. But the point is, where are you going to get those products that are fundamental for primary care or for a good nutrition? And if we know that from personalized health care and doing studies, and we find out that eating, for example, avocados and salmon could be good for you, then where do we get those products if you start producing? And this is very important. And by the way, Chile, for example, started and now is the second producer of salmon. And we know that salmon is very good. So this is artificially made, but yet for a diet purpose and for personalized medicine is something that cardiologists recommend, because it's good fat that it has, and it's good for the diet, et cetera, et cetera. But we need to think about this connection. Like Francesco said, everything is really connected and yet disconnected. And we, as engineers, we need to think in terms of systems. Systems thinking is very important, so that we find places where we can replace the production or do something so that all of this fits into a good plan. That's all.
Thank you so much. And just a second, I would like to show you before the meeting started. I just hid this slide. What you just said on the bottom, you can see eat local, think global. I would say the same. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all the participants. We must think in and manage the globalization in another way, localization, global and local, and integrate the global and the local together using digital technology. Thank you very much.